Hi, it's Geoff Chalmers here from discoverdoublebase.com, which is the home of online learning for double bass players. We provide courses, lessons and interviews just like this one today to inspire you and help you on your journey. And I'm joined by one of my favourite jazz bass players who's a really big name, particularly on the European jazz scene, where I've seen him perform many times. He's a teacher, he's the professor of double bass, jazz double bass at the Royal Welsh College of Music, and he has played with numerous big names in the jazz world, people like Tim Garland, Wolfgang Muthspiel and Gwilym Simcock. So it gives me great pleasure today to welcome Yuri Goloubev. How are you, Yuri?
Hi, Geoff, and thank you very much for having me here. And I'm fine.
Fantastic.
It's great. It's very nice in Leeds. A little bit empty.
It is. It's a little bit quiet at the moment.
Yeah, a little bit quiet, but otherwise, really great. Thanks for the invite.
I've just pronounced your surname wrong, I think. Is it Goloubev?
Yes.
Oh, that's better. I've been worried about that all morning, so I'm glad that we've managed to get off to a good start. Well, Yuri, you're really renowned as somebody who has... You kind of have this really virtuosic approach to the double bass. It seems effortless what you play, and you kind of combine that with some really tasteful jazz language. And I think that's what people really, they're drawn to your playing because of that. And a lot of that has to do with playing in thumb position. So I wondered if maybe we could discuss a little bit your approach to thumb position and kind of virtuosity on the double bass as a broader topic. And
I never think of like virtuosity as a goal in itself, and it makes me remember an old interview with Eddie Gomez, who used to be one of my favorite. Well, he still is. Yeah, obviously he's still with us. Thank God. Favorite bass players. When he was asked something about this, and he said that this is not so much a matter of technique, but rather a matter of a concept.
Yeah,
and. I pretty much agree with this. It's the way you think. So basically, you maybe sort of switch between different modes. So when you just comp, you comp whatever it is. If it's a line, walking bass, I don't know, Latin, whatever. And when you solo, you think of bass as if it was a soprano saxophone, maybe, or any kind of wind instrument, or a piano, or whatever. So trying, not like deliberately trying, but not. Getting into the bass player's language, so trying to avoid it, not trying, but avoiding it, just thinking somewhere else.
And I think it's really hard to avoid that, going from the role of the accompanist into the improviser. When you were starting out, who were some of the bass players that had this really strong concept? We've already mentioned Eddie Gomez, and of course obviously Scott LaFaro's coming to my mind as we're on that lineage, but who is there that's really got you excited when you were earlier in your career?
This is an interesting question, because I've never been really focused on bass players, to be honest. I was mainly listening to like piano players and sax players, but of course, there were a few people that have, I think, had greatly influenced what I do. And first of all, I would like to name Ray Brown.
Yes.
Because I absolutely love his lines and love his thinking.
Yeah.
We did speak about Eddie Gomez, who I've had the fortune to know. I know him personally quite well since many years, but I haven't seen him also for quite a few years, but we know each other. And John Patitucci, I think he's just a great musician, which is the best thing about him. It's not like a bass player, he's a proper real musician, deep composer. Maybe these three bass players would be, the first ones to mention for me.
Have you taken many lessons with some of these giants of the jazz world? It's really interesting that you've met or know Eddie Gomez. I mean, that's it must have been a really exciting opportunity. And have you taken lessons with other folks?
No, actually none. But the lessons you take, you listen.
Yeah.
And you metabolize it, you analyze it. It makes me remember something not from the jazz world, but I think it's a fairly good example actually. When I was a student, I used to go to classical concerts really a lot, like few times a week. And once it was still in Moscow, there was the Bayerische Rundfunk Symphony Orchestra, which is one of the main orchestras in Europe. And in the first part, I was sitting somewhere pretty close to the stage and actually quite close to the basses. And I was like, oh, I really don't like the way they play, like, you know, the way they use the bow, sometimes pretty much close to the fingerboard. Well, lots of things. And I was, to be honest, a bit annoyed. And I decided for the second part, I would go somewhere else. I went quite far from there. And what I heard, an amazing sound of the bass section, absolutely astonishing. You know, this was one of these moments when you learn, when you maybe think that what they were teaching you, it is good, but it's not complete, and it's not a dogma, not like something you have to stick on. It's watch the truth. There is no truth, but still, the truth is much wider.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. And I think it's really interesting how the effect of being behind the instrument and then out front of the instrument. I've really enjoyed, you know, hearing you play, and I always love when I'll play, and I played your instrument briefly, and I'll play it and I'll hear how it sounds and your experience changes, and the projection, and particularly I think with the bow as well, it really kind of, it's a fascinating thing. So in terms of thumb position, you make it look really, really effortless. And this instrument as well, I think it's worth noting, isn't one that you've played that much. I mean, how long have you had this bass for?
A few days.
A few days, yeah. Okay, yeah. And you just seem really comfortable when you were just playing just there. I mean, like,
well, it's, you know, this one is a pretty standard size instrument. It's pretty playable. It was just... it was built very recently by a maker in Budapest, so I'm importing it for a student of mine who's now starting in Leeds. It's just such a coincidence.
Yeah.
So I'm giving it to her right after our recording.
She is a very lucky student, because I've played this bass and it's wonderful.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice. You know, it's a nice instrument. But as far as the thumb position is concerned, I always think that there is no rocket science about it. What we should aim at is being as natural as possible, because when we just move our hand, if we do not do anything, the thumb just ends up where it should.
Okay.
And it's important that we hit the string with a joint, with a knuckle, whatever you want to call it. And then in the thumb position itself, as we know, there are basically three extensions. So when we have the major third between the third and the thumb, we have the major, perfect fourth, and we have the minor third. Yeah. So you just kind of combine all these, and what's also very important, that wherever you are in the thumb position, that your thumb is always on a specific note, so you really know where you are, because the thumb is actually indicating at where you are in a way. I'm not sure how to express it, but
so you're always in one of these three hand shapes, which is either perfect fourth, major third, or minor third.
Exactly.
So there's a couple of things I need to ask you about here. Just backing up briefly, you mentioned the thumb. What part of the thumb is making contact? Is it over the knuckle? Is it just between the knuckle and the bed?
No, it is over the knuckle. Because this is the bone that goes slightly outside, and that's the
maybe you could hold that up to this camera
only
here.
Hard space. So if you try to play to use a soft space, it'll be big problem. Yeah, because you need to be firm and solid.
Yeah. And then as you're moving around the bass, you're changing between these three positions, but your thumb is remaining as part of a note. And do you have a kind of sort of awareness, I guess, you're moving between the three? Was that based on the kind of Petrarchy chromatic, semi-chromatic and diatonic, or do you think about things in that way? And do you have a specific fingering system? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, a specific fingering system. That's a good question. I think it's all about the position technique. It's not like Petrarchy. What was his?
Franco Petrarchy.
Petrarchy or Petrarchy. I'm not so sure. I live in Italy. It's very embarrassing.
I butcher everybody's names.
Petrarchy.
Yeah, Petrarchy.
Which will be Petrarchy. Italian. Anyhow, I'm actually not familiar with his method, to be honest, and I wasn't really using any books or anything, even as a student. And there are lots of things that you can either take from your teachers or other players, or just learn yourself and come to some bold conclusions, so to speak, you know.
And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about the thumb as well was your use of vibrato in the thumb. You've got this really vocal quality in the way, and actually in the lower positions as well. I hear this sort of expressiveness that's done in a really tasteful way. And I noticed that you're using vibrato on the thumb as well as the other thing. Is that something that you're kind of conscious of, or? Yeah, just little.
I never think about this.
It's beautiful, Yuri.
Thanks, but yeah, I mean, speaking of vibrato, basically, I would say that there are two types of vibrato, and it's very easy to illustrate it maybe here somewhere. So in classical music, as we know, the finger stays on the same spot.
Yes.
And we just use this movement of the wrist. And in jazz, it can be also based on, I'm exaggerating.
A wider.
Yes, it's not sticking to the string, so it's kind of moving. Now I'm doing too much, and it's a very intuitive thing. And sometimes you would do this. So it's like really tiny movement, and you have to. It comes from the music. You have to feel it.
I hear that in John Patitucci's playing, and it's a very hard thing, I think, as you say, to teach. It's a very natural thing. Well, listen, let's finish off with a couple of kind of shorter questions for you. One of the things that I've noticed is that every time I've seen you perform, you've been playing seated. Do you always play seated?
Yes. I did try to teach myself into standing. Well, actually, I sit since I was like 14 maybe, so always. And I did perform quite a few concerts recently, like let's say in the course of the last few years, standing, and at the end, no, I never feel really comfortable. I mean, there is a big advantage of when you stand is the sound, because you do not touch the back of the bass with your knee. Yeah, also, you know what, maybe one more little detail. If you have a really big bass, maybe it is easier to stand.
Okay.
Because whenever, this is like a 3/4 bass, basically, and whenever I play a 3/4 bass, if I try to stand, I feel really unsettled.
Really?
So maybe it also has to do something with the size.
Yeah.
So the bass that I have at home now, a fairly big German bass, I can actually play it standing way more easily than I would play this one.
And I think the balance point of these instruments really kind of affects it. The larger instruments as well, they're weighted differently. All of these things come into play. And one thing I thought as well when I was watching you play is with the thumb position situation is that essentially it's a technique, not a location. You're kind of moving around the instrument into the lower positions. You make it look very kind of comfortable. And I wondered if part of that was to do with playing seated. It's obviously a slightly different process.
Let's stand up.
Yeah.
I think it's fairly same. Well, to stand, I need the amp in I would need to extend
a
it
little bit
obviously.
higher, yes.
Yeah. But sort of similar. I think, you know what, it is also about sort of intuitively preparing your elbow. So when you know in the back of your mind that you're about to hit the thumb positions, you do this thing. So what is important, what I tell to my students, to keep this part fairly straight. So avoiding this, so you can apply the weight of your arm from above. Well, obviously, we're all a bit lazy. Not that I always do it like this, but as a generic rule, as the approach to start with, that is what happens. And that's why I find it actually pretty simple. So if we put too much thought into it, you know what? The other day, I was just practicing, remembering the Eccles Sonata, which I'm sure you know very, very well.
Beautiful.
The last movement. And there is this bit there, and I used to play it with this kind of bowing, and I played it automatically. And then I stopped, like, wait a minute, what was the bowing there? And I couldn't play it anymore. Yeah. Because I started to think, we should not think too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice.
And then I had to relearn it again in this particular way, like, to get rid of this having to think about it.
Yeah, it's getting things into when you're operating on your subconscious, like you're not thinking about thumb position. And I often find that players who have played, like yourself, who are very experienced musicians, then to kind of go back and think, well, actually, it's an interesting process how to deconstruct your playing and to be thinking about how you would explain it to other people. But you do it beautifully, Yuri, and it's
thank you.
and you're playing absolutely wonderful. I think we should finish this video with an example of you playing, and I'm sure that we'll hear some beautiful thumb position. But first of all, before we get to that, let people know where they can find out more about you online, Yuri.
Well, obviously I have my website, which is yurigoloubev.com. Now I'm slightly mispronouncing it because it's written as Goloubev. That's an old story to explain the spelling. It's pronounced as Goloubev, but anyhow, so everyone could know where to find me. Then there is a Wikipedia page, there is, Facebook, and also on top of that, I'm trying to do some YouTube tutorials to help young musician, and maybe even not so young musician, with the basics. Because when I started teaching in the UK, I realized that many kids or young adults, they are actually lacking some basics, because it sometimes happens their teacher was a violin teacher or I don't know, clarinet teacher, whatever, and on top of them playing really difficult instruments in really difficult, setup, physically very challenging. So they start playing like this, and they learn things, unfortunately, incorrectly. Well, of course, not everyone, but I've seen it quite a bit. So I decided to go out on a mission, and to explain some of the basics, as well as bring to the country these nice Hungarian basses for my students.
Well, we'll absolutely provide links to the tutorials, which I've really enjoyed. You explain things beautifully there. And also, I'd just like to, before we finish off, give a shout out for your CD, which is Two Chevrons Apart. I've been listening to it this morning. The recorded sound is beautiful. Who's on the album? We've got Tim Garland.
Yeah, it is a group of people. We often play together in various combinations, and it's an absolutely great band. So it's Tim Garland on the saxophones, it's John Turville on the piano, and Asaf Sirkis on drums. And it was recorded in a very, very well-known studio in Italy, Artesuono, which is often used by ECM, by this great engineer Stefano Amerio. I've done many albums there, so we all love coming back there.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'm going to provide the links to that below. Of course, if you want to learn more about Discover Double Bass, you can go visit our website, discoverdouble.bass.com. We're all about helping you on your journey to better play the instrument that we all love. And just to finish off, here's some inspiration. We'll have a little bit of solo double bass performance by the great Yuri Goloubev.